I never thought I'd see a man like him on his knees. But that night, under the flicker of the saloon lamps, the chief lowered his head to me, and the whole town went silent. The saloon smelled of whiskey and tobacco smoke, the air heavy with sweat and dust. Poker cards lay scattered across the floor where men had dropped them, too stunned to keep playing. Outside, the wind dragged wooden shutters against the walls, each creak louder than the last. I clutched the edge of my worn shawl, trying to steady the tremble in my hands. None of this made sense. The chief had ruled the town with iron silence. People feared him, followed him, cursed him only behind closed doors. He had been the one who mocked me when my husband was lowered into the ground, whispering that a woman alone had no place here. He had spat on my doorstep when I tried to reopen the ranch. And now, his voice broke the silence. The town is yours now. His knees pressed into the dirty floorboards. His men stood in the shadows, rifles still leaning against their shoulders. Their eyes didn't blink. They waited. The entire saloon held its breath. I wanted to ask him why. Why me? Why now? But the words froze in my throat. Instead, my mind raced. What game was he playing? This wasn't an apology, it couldn't be. He wasn't the kind of man to bow for mercy. Someone coughed from the corner. Another man spat into a spittoon, the metal clang echoing too sharp. The chief didn't move. He stayed on his knees, his head lowered. I saw the scar running across the side of his neck, a mark I remembered from the day he had dragged two men outside and shot them for less than unpaid debts. That scar seemed more alive than his eyes now. "You'll answer me," I finally said, my voice breaking more than I wanted. He lifted his gaze. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't cruelty. It was fear. And in that moment, the room shifted. The men in the shadows didn't look like guards anymore. They looked like witnesses waiting for something I didn't understand. My chest tightened as I realized this wasn't about respect. This was a performance, and I was at the center of it. The chief's lips moved again, but before I could catch his words, the saloon doors burst open. Cold night air slammed inside, carrying dust and the sound of boots on wood. A voice I hadn't heard in years cut through the silence. "She doesn't own this town. Not yet." The saloon doors banged against the wall and the whole room turned. My breath caught before I even saw his face. I knew that voice. It had lived in my nightmares for years. He stepped inside, tall, leaner than I remembered, his coat frayed at the edges, but his boots still carrying the weight of someone who had never once begged. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, but I didn't need the light to recognize him. Samuel, my husband's brother, the man who had sworn at the funeral that I would pay for ruining their family's name. I froze where I stood. The chief didn't rise from his knees. Instead, he glanced back at Samuel, and something sharp flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or fear. "She doesn't own this town." "Not yet," Samuel repeated, his voice low, steady. He walked past the card tables, his spurs clicking against the floor. The men in the shadows stiffened but didn't lift their rifles. The room was caught in a balance I didn't understand, as if everyone else had rehearsed a play and I had stumbled onto the stage too late. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice cracked more than I wanted. Samuel stopped a few feet, away from me. His eyes finally met mine. They weren't warm. They never had been. "I came back for what's mine," he said. The words hit harder than the wind howling outside. I wanted to spit back. What was his? The land? The cattle long gone? The house he had abandoned? Or me? The woman he had despised? My mouth stayed shut, but my hands tightened around my shawl. The chief finally pushed himself up from the floor. He didn't bow anymore. He stood tall, dust on his trousers, his shoulders squaring. "She's already taken it," he said, his voice carrying across the silent saloon. Taken what? I wanted to scream. No one had asked me if I wanted anything. No one had given me a choice. Samuel let out a short laugh, sharp as a knife. She hasn't taken a thing. She's just waiting for someone to hand it to her. The words stung because somewhere deep down I feared they might be true. I had survived alone, yes, but surviving wasn't the same as fighting. Maybe I hadn't fought enough. Maybe all I had done was endure. The men in the shadows shifted. Rifles scraped against the wooden floor. My pulse thudded in my ears. Something was about to break. Then Samuel reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the nearest table. The chief's eyes narrowed. "Read it," Samuel said, "and tell me again this town belongs to her." The folded paper lay on the table, its edges torn, the seal broken. No one moved to touch it. The saloon was still, save for the hiss of the oil lamps and the faint whistle of the wind sneaking through the cracks in the walls. My throat tightened. Samuel's eyes stayed on me, daring me to move first. "Go on," he said. "See what your claim is worth." I forced myself forward, each step loud on the warped boards. My fingers shook as I reached for the paper. The chief's gaze followed me, sharp and calculating, but he didn't interfere. When I unfolded it, the ink leapt out under the dim light. My husband's handwriting. My heart lurched. It was a deed, signed and dated the week before he died. My husband had left the ranch, not to me, but to Samuel. The room blurred. My breath came shallow. I read the words twice, 3 times, as if the letters would shift into something different, but they didn't. He had given everything to the brother who despised me. My shawl slipped from my shoulders, falling to the floor. I didn't pick it up. Samuel's voice cut through the silence. "You see? You never had it. Not the land, not the respect, not even his trust. All this time you've been clinging to scraps that were never yours." My stomach turned. I remembered nights by the fire with my husband, when he'd promised me we would rebuild after the drought. Promises spoken with the same hand that signed me away. The chief broke the silence. "He's dead. Papers don't rule the living." His tone was cold, but his words made the room stir. Men exchanged uneasy glances. Samuel leaned closer to me, his shadow stretching across the table. "And yet," he said softly, "the law will follow me. The town will follow me. And you'll be left with nothing but pity." I wanted to scream, at him, to tear the paper in half, but my fingers froze. Rage and shame fought in my chest. Every eye in the saloon was on me. They weren't just watching, they were judging. My voice came out low, almost a whisper. "Why show this now?" Samuel smiled without warmth. "Because the chief is weak. He thinks bowing to you will save him. But the town doesn't need a widow, it needs a man who knows how to keep it." The chief's hand moved toward his revolver, slow but steady. My breath hitched. The tension cracked like dry wood in a fire. "Careful," Samuel warned, his hand brushing his own holster. The room braced for gunfire, and that's when I noticed it. The signature. My husband's name was spelled wrong. The mistake burned into my vision. My husband had signed every letter, every bill of sale, every ledger with the same careful script. He never once misspelled his own name. But on this deed, the R was missing. Samuel hadn't noticed. Maybe he thought no one would. I lifted the paper high enough for the lamp to catch it. "This isn't his hand," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. The room stirred, whispers breaking out. Samuel's jaw tightened. "You calling me a liar?" I met his eyes. "I'm calling you a forger." The word cut through the saloon, like a whip. The chief's mouth twisted into something almost like a smile. "She's right," he said. "I've seen the man's writing. This ain't it." Samuel's face flushed. His hand went to his holster. The rifles in the shadows shifted, metal clinking as men drew breath. My heart hammered. One wrong move, and blood would stain the floor. "Don't," I said quickly, stepping between them. My palms were damp, but I kept my back straight. "Killing each other won't change the truth. You tried to steal what was never yours." Samuel's eyes darted to the men behind the chief. For a second, I saw doubt flicker across his face. He wasn't certain they would side with him. Not anymore. I pressed forward. You always hated me. Hated that he chose me. Hated that I kept going when you ran. But this town isn't yours, Samuel. And it never will be. The silence stretched. My words felt heavier than the revolvers hanging at their sides. Finally, the chief spoke again, his voice rough but steady. You heard her. The town's hers now. By her grit, not by a paper. Samuel's hand hovered near his gun. Then he laughed, short, bitter, hollow. He shoved the false deed off the table. It fluttered to the floor like trash. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low. The whole town will. He turned, pushed through the saloon doors, and vanished into the night. The wind swallowed him whole. For a long moment, no one moved. The chief's men lowered their rifles, the tension easing just enough for air to return to my lungs. My shawl still lay at my feet, forgotten. The chief looked at me, not bowing now, not mocking either, just studying me. It's settled then, he said. The town's yours. The words echoed, heavy with promise and warning both. And as the saloon slowly returned to its murmurs, I realized something colder than the wind outside. Samuel wasn't gone for good. He would be back. And when he returned, he wouldn't come alone. 3 nights passed before the church bell rang at the wrong hour. Midnight. I woke to the sound, heart pounding, shawl wrapped tight around my shoulders. Out the window, I saw torches moving through the streets. Shadows crossed the dirt road, boots kicking dust into the cold air. He had come back. I stepped outside before the pounding on my door could start. The chief was already there, a rifle slung over his shoulder, his eyes sharp in the torchlight. He's back, he said. I nodded. We didn't waste words. The town gathered at the square, women clutching children close, men gripping whatever weapons they had. The firelight showed fear in their faces, but also something else. Resolve. Samuel walked forward, flanked by strangers. Hired men, rough and armed, their eyes flat as stone. He looked thinner, more desperate, but his smile carried poison. You thought I'd leave, he called out. You thought this was over? The ranch, the town, it's mine. She doesn't deserve it. None of you deserve it. His men spread out, rifles raised, the square tensed, ready to break. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself forward past the line of neighbors, past the chief. You forged his name, I said, voice carrying over the crackle of torches. You lied to all of us. You don't want the town. You want power, and you'll burn this place down to get it. Samuel's eyes narrowed. Better ash than under you. His hand dropped to his gun. The chief stepped forward, rifle raised. You'll have to go through us first. His men closed ranks. For the first time, I saw it clearly. He wasn't kneeling anymore. He was standing beside me. The standoff stretched, every breath louder than the last. Then a single shot cracked the night. One of Samuel's men dropped, clutching his shoulder. Panic rippled. The townsfolk surged, not scattering this time, but standing their ground. More shots rang. Torches fell. Smoke filled the square. Through the chaos, Samuel stumbled back. His gun slipped from his hand, clattering against the stones. Our eyes locked. For a moment I saw not a rival, not a brother-in-law, just a broken man who had lost everything and would rather destroy than rebuild. Leave, I said, my voice steady. If you ever step foot here again, it won't be mercy waiting. His face twisted, but he knew it was done. He turned, clutching his pride tighter than any weapon, and disappeared into the night once more. The square quieted. Smoke drifted, children cried, but the town still stood. The chief lowered his rifle, his shoulders heavy. He looked at me, then at the people gathering close. It's hers, he said again, louder this time. The town's hers. And for the first time, no one argued. I bent to pick up my shawl, wrapping it firm around me. It no longer felt like armor. It felt like belonging.